Good morning and welcome to Coventry Vineyard. So this morning I'm at Draycott Water. I'm actually recording this on Friday. We've got a family wedding today on Sunday. So Abby and Nathan are getting married this afternoon and you're all invited. So there's links on our newsletter if you want to join in with the Zoom at 4:30 today. But I'm here at Draycott Water. This is one of my favourite places to come and run around the outside. It's about 5 miles round, and some of the water that comes to Coventry comes from here. Just a couple of notices before we kick off on some stuff. The children's groups are going to be doing the Good Samaritan as their topic for this morning, and for the Lego or Craft Challenge, what we're looking for is an emergency vehicle. So at the Zoom call, it's going to be later on, it's 11 this morning. If you want to show off your emergency vehicle, like an ambulance, or it could be as simple as a donkey, or whatever it's going to be, we will judge those fairly and award prizes in somehow. So yeah, this is normally our Neighbourhood Sunday, and our Neighbourhood Sundays have kind of gone a little bit weird with the whole COVID-19 pandemic. And when we started Neighbourhood Sunday, we didn't want it just to be a monthly event, but we wanted it to be a lifestyle where people would actively engage with their neighbours and be friends to their neighbours and love their neighbours. And so what I'm going to do is going to do something short today and then encourage you to get out there and maybe knock on some doors, socially distance, and just say, how are you doing? Or just see what your neighbours need. So just a brief reflection, really. So yeah, when we started Neighbourhood Sunday, we were influenced by things like the Neighbourhood Initiative with some friends of ours that did that in the US. And but really it comes from Jesus' command to love your neighbour. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a campaign of love your neighbour, which some of the HTB churches, I know Trent Vineyard have been doing. And it really kind of, as I said earlier, really kind of raises that lifestyle of loving your neighbour and engaging with them. But it has to be more than just as a relief emergency response. How do we live a lifestyle past COVID-19 of being in community with our neighbours and loving our neighbours? Now, the thing about loving your neighbour is it always starts with our love for God. If we try to do stuff and love our neighbours outside of that, then we start to do it out of duty and responsibility, and the just the drive behind it has to come from the right place. So the Apostle Paul says in Galatians 5:22 that love is a fruit of the Spirit. And in 1 Corinthians 13, which we're going to be having later on at this wedding, Paul says that love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonour others, it is not self-seeking, not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And so we cannot try to love more. We need to allow God to love more through us. See, loving our neighbours starts with our love of God. And I think sometimes we can be indifferent to our neighbours. And if you are indifferent to your neighbours, the likelihood is that there's a level of indifference that you have towards God. The two things are related. If you're feeling indifferent towards God, then you're going to feel indifferent to your neighbours. And when we talk about our neighbours, it's not just those who live to the left or to the right of us. Our neighbours are those that we live and work close to. And with the pandemic, things have changed. We've had to physically distance ourselves from others. We have needed to find ways to connect digitally, which is what we're doing this morning, rather than in person. And for some of us, that's been really difficult. For some of us, that's been okay, because we've been doing that anyway. But we need to have that face-to-face contact. And now, as things have been easing somewhat, I want to challenge you. What are you doing to engage with people that maybe haven't seen for a while? Maybe people in church, maybe people that you haven't connected in with for a while. How are you seeing them face to face, meeting up with them with all the kind of continued precautions that we have? But how we continue to engage with one another? Because we are made to have connection and community with one another. I'm really thankful that we've got things like Zoom and YouTube and all those other things that we can communicate. But I also recognise that we need to have that face-to-face contact as well. And so as we start to phase back and, this new term starting, we're going to be looking at ways of doing both. How do we have those face-to-face interactions and also have the digital presence so that we can help those people that are still feeling vulnerable? And so in Coventry Vineyard, we have different levels, different scales of groupings for people to connect with one another. We have our journey groups, which are groups of 3 to 4. And that's really focused around Bible study, reading the Bible together and then putting it into practice. So reading and then obeying. And you can do that digitally. Now with some of the restrictions eased, you can do some of that out in the open, in your social bubble. If you've got people that are in that social bubble that you've created, it may be that you can get 4 people together from 2 different households. And then there's life groups. Life groups are continuing online, digitally. I'm trying to look at ways to have people together outside in the open air. It may be a little bit more of a challenge over autumn, but we're going to persevere with that. And so we've got journey groups, life groups, then we've got our neighbourhood groups, which are groups of 30 to 50. And I think that is where we want to be focusing a lot of our efforts. As things do start to lift, how do we have our neighbourhood groups as places where we can do church together and be church together, rather than just focusing straight for our whole church gathering? How do we have our life groups and our neighbourhood groups providing the pastoral care and providing all the stuff that we would normally do, but maybe on a smaller scale? So coming back to our neighbours are really also anyone that we meet. So Jesus highlighted this in the story of the Good Samaritan. The religious people refused to move towards the one in need. Maybe out of fear, but maybe out of, they didn't have the time. I don't know what it was, but it was also a lack of understanding of what it means to love God. They didn't take that opportunity to demonstrate the love of God to the person that was on the ground. And I think it's very easy for religious people to start to miss love as they go about all their religious business. And so Jesus brought it all back to love God, love your neighbours. As we grow in our love of God, as we at times choose to love God, to follow his ways, to love him with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind and strength, then we're in a position to love our neighbours. And it's not that we just say, oh, I don't really love God that much, therefore I'm not going to love our neighbour, my neighbour. See, to love our neighbours, we do first receive the love of God and then also love ourselves. And that's why I've come to Draycott Water. So last week we were in Scotland, in sunny Scotland, and we were holidaying by the Glenkiln Reservoir. Wasn't quite a loch, but it looked like a loch. And so this is Draycott Water. This is the closest I could get to a loch or a reservoir near to where I live. And the reason I'm here is that I was just thinking it's just a great picture of the love of God, that there's this vast expanse of water that's providing water for those who are thirsty in Rugby and also some of Coventry. But for us, are we developing that reservoir of love that we have for God, that we can then let that flow out to our neighbours? So when we were up in Scotland, there was some rain, and the river was sort of overflowing. It was coming into this reservoir, and you could see this channel of water coming into the reservoir from one end and just churning up all the water in the reservoir. And at the other end, you had the spillway, and it was just pouring down. And the love of God is like this reservoir. If we're not allowing God to flow his love into us, we're not going to be in a position to let that flow out to those around us. And so when we started Neighbourhood Sunday, it was an opportunity for us to demonstrate all the stuff that we do on a Sunday morning anyway, but then also to let that spill out, to let that flow out to our neighbours. That the Sunday morning gathering is always really good, but we wanted to put what we learned on our Sunday morning gathering into practice on a regular basis. My friend Lynn Corrie says this. He says that without knowing the love of God personally, there is a real danger of serving from a place of the old nature, the place where the Spirit cannot thrive. As we allow the Lord to love us and change our hearts, we demonstrate true discipleship to those around us. This kind of authentic relationship with God is what our culture craves and needs. He goes on to say the prerequisite for what we do in our neighbourhoods is the love of God, his love flowing through us and our love for him. He concludes by saying the love of God is the most powerful and influential force we have for loving our neighbours. It marks us as being uniquely Christian. This kind of love does not come from us, but from God. We are mere conduits of his love. And so today, the 6th of September 2020, what can you do to demonstrate the love of God to your neighbours? So we're going to go to our Zoom call, our Zoom gathering, and we'll have a couple of questions, and we're going to pray for each other. But really, I wanted to encourage you to get out and to connect in with your neighbours and to ask them, is there anything that we can do to help you? Is there anything that we can do to meet any needs? How can we pray for you? So, bless you. we're going to be seeing you next week, and we're starting our new series next week called State of Mind. It's all about emotional health and Jesus, of course, and how emotional health and discipleship are connected to one another. And for many of us, we've had a bit of an emotional journey, and we've had our ups and downs. Maybe at the moment you're feeling particularly stressed out, maybe particularly anxious, maybe you are feeling depressed, maybe there's a whole load of stuff going on, and this is a time for you to connect in whatever way you can with your church community. And so we're going to be saying, well, how do we be emotionally healthy, and linking that to the love of God and loving our neighbours. So bless you, and we'll see you soon.